I have served on 11 galactic tribunals. I have judged warlords, dictators, and species that burned entire worlds. But I have never seen anything like what happened when they put a human on the jury. My name is Counselor Veth of the Keldari Judicial Assembly, and this is my account of the trial that broke the Galactic Court. The defendant was Admiral Koss of the Hegemony Fourth Fleet. The charges were genocide, 17 billion dead on the colony worlds of the Rithani Corridor. The evidence was overwhelming. Intercepted communications, sensor logs, survivors' testimony. The verdict should have taken an hour, but a galactic tribunal requires one juror from each of the 12 major species, and humanity had just been granted major species status. So for the first time, a human sat in the jury chamber. His name was David Park, middle-aged, unremarkable. He worked in agricultural logistics on a colony called New Wisconsin. He had no legal training, no political connections. He was selected at random from the human census. When he walked into the chamber, he brought a notebook and a pen, an actual pen. The other jurors didn't know what it was. Trial lasted 6 weeks. David Park said almost nothing. He wrote in his notebook. He listened. The rest of us spent the trial doing what tribunal jurors always do. We calculated. The Keldari delegation, my people, needed the hegemony's trade routes intact. A guilty verdict would trigger sanctions that would cost us billions. The Morhani wanted a guilty verdict because it would weaken the hegemony's military authority in their sector. The Thesic abstained from everything as usual. The Brevari were allied with the defendant's species. Everyone had an angle. Everyone had something to gain or lose. That is how galactic justice works. It's not about guilt. It's about consequences, David Park wrote in his notebook. Deliberations began on a Monday. By Tuesday, we had 9 votes for acquittal, not because anyone believed Admiral Koss was innocent. Everyone in that room knew he had done it. But the Keldari bloc had promised trade concessions. The Morhani had been pressured by the hegemony into switching their vote. The Brevari threatened to withdraw from 3 mutual defense treaties. Politics. The vote should have been unanimous for conviction. Instead, it was 9-2 for acquittal, with 1 abstention. The abstention was the Thesic. The 2 votes for conviction were myself and David Park. I voted guilty because the evidence demanded it, and I refused to sell my integrity for trade routes. David Park voted guilty because, and I quote from the transcript, he did it. What happened next is why I am recording this account. David Park stood up. He opened his notebook, and for the next 4 hours, he dismantled every political calculation in the room. He started with the Keldari trade routes. He had calculated on paper with his pen that the trade concessions promised to us were worth less than the routes we would gain if the hegemony was sanctioned. He had the numbers. He had done the math in a notebook. While the rest of us were making deals in hallways, this man from an agricultural colony had been doing arithmetic. Then he turned to the Morhani. He read their voting record from the last 6 tribunals. Every time they had voted for acquittal, the defendant's species had expanded into Morhani territory within a decade. He had the dates. He had the maps. He drew them in his notebook. Then he looked at the Brevari and said something that I will never forget. He said, "You're voting to acquit a man who killed 17 billion people because you're afraid of what his friends might do. How many people do his friends need to kill before you're more afraid of them than of losing a treaty?" The room was silent. I have been in many silent rooms. This silence was different. This was the silence of 11 species realizing that the 12th species, the one they considered emotional and irrational and primitive, had been paying attention while they played politics. David Park sat down. He closed his notebook. He said, "I'd like to call for a revote." The Thesic spoke first. They changed their abstention to guilty. Then the Morhani. One by one, the votes changed. Not because David Park was eloquent. He was not. Not because he was intimidating. He was a farmer from a colony nobody had heard of. The votes changed because he had asked the only question that mattered, and every species in that room had been too sophisticated to ask it. Did he do it? Yes. Then vote like it. The final vote was 12-0. Guilty. Admiral Koss was sentenced to confinement for the remainder of his natural life. The hegemony filed 6 protests, all denied. 3 trade treaties collapsed. 2 new ones formed. The galactic economy shifted. All because a farmer with a notebook asked a question that 11 sophisticated species were too politically entangled to ask. I spoke to David Park after the trial. I asked him how he knew the trade numbers, how he had calculated the Morhani expansion patterns, how he had known exactly what to say. He told me that on New Wisconsin, when a fox gets into the henhouse, you don't negotiate with the fox. You don't calculate the economic impact of losing a few chickens. You deal with the fox. I did not understand the metaphor at the time. I have since learned what a fox is and what a henhouse is. And I have concluded that humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization may not be their technology or their military or their stubborn refusal to die. It may be that they are the only species that still knows what a jury is for.